Hey there, everybody. How we doing today? My name's Anthony. I'm a data analyst here at Looker. Thanks so much for joining our webinar here on saving development resources and delivering value with embedded analytics. Nice to get on a webinar when a lot of us are working shelter in place, so nice to be able to talk to a bunch of you. Bummed I can't see you all, but happy to have you on. Like I said, I'm a data analyst here at Looker, and for a little bit of background, you're going to meet Oliver in a moment. And the two of us work together on a proof of concept with Looker, so I'm familiar with his business pretty well. But he's going to give us a deep dive on what SupporTrends does and how they were able to use Looker to save development resources. Before we get started, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items. We'll have a 15-minute Q&A session. There is an area where you guys can type in questions, and we're going to answer those at the end of the presentation. But before that, we'll go through Oliver's presentation, and then I'll give a brief overview of Looker, where it fits into the space, and how we specifically are designed to save development resources. But other than that, I will pass it over to Oliver, and we'll get started.
Awesome. Yes, thank you so much, Anthony. As you know, my name's Oliver. I'm a co-founder of SupporTrends, and we recently deployed Looker into our environment, and I want to tell you guys a little bit about how that went. Yeah, hopefully it'll be educational. So a little bit about us and what we're good at. So SupporTrends is a modular software as a service platform. We process natural language. We extract insights from call recordings, support tickets, surveys. Really, anytime a customer reaches out to a business and asks for help or explains what their issues are, we process those conversations and try to make them better. Our primary kind of advantage is fast setup. We can spool up a new account in just a couple minutes. We structure this unstructured data automatically, and we have near infinite flexibility. So that's just a little bit about us. One thing we are not good at is designing charts and graphs. And we knew from the beginning when we set out to build this product that we were going to rely on some external help to build our charts and graphs. But it took a little bit longer than we thought it would. And yeah, we kind of struggled along for a little while. This is actually our user interface in the beginning. This was after 6 months. It's pretty basic. It's just a couple tables. We eventually added a line graph or two, but they were problematic, and they look fine. But having to manage both a natural language processing engine, data storage and structuring, and a whole bunch of other things on a platform, as well as managing the visualizations and determining how all those work, became a bigger and bigger job for us. So 14 days after we decided to work with Looker, our dashboard had changed from what you saw a few minutes ago to what you see here. And this was actually within our trial period. We had completely transitioned over to Looker and deployed it to our live production environment, which was, certainly a surprise for us. And it was probably a surprise for the Looker team as well, because we were able to work through it, so quickly. So kind of the conversation or the discussion for us about buy versus build, it wasn't really a discussion. We always knew that we were going to not build our own visualizations long term. This is why.
Hey, Oliver, if I can step in here and ask a question. You mentioned you always kind of knew that you were going to need a little support on the analytics and visualizations front. Was there a certain moment, or like it seems like you got pretty far in-house building you guys' own line graph there. Was there a certain point along the way where you triggered, okay, now is the time to buy versus build, and what was that? What was that moment?
Yeah, so we actually acquired a new customer sort of as a surprise one day, and their volume was many times higher than our combined volume at that time. So suddenly overnight we ran into a situation where we had these crazy volumes, and we were managing both the natural language processing side and the visualization side. And I distinctly remember 3 or 4 weeks after this, I was on my bike, and I'm like, this is crazy. We are spending more time trying to get our visualizations to render than we are, actually building a natural language processing product. So that was the day that we kind of came back and committed to working with a company whose job it was to make visualizations work well.
Got it. And one more follow-up question there. Definitely not what you want to be thinking about on your bike ride. But when you did make that decision, when you brought it back to the rest of the team and said, hey, I think it's time that we go with a bot solution instead or start looking at this, what was the response from, in the engineering team? Were they excited about that? Were they worried about losing the control and flexibility over the process?
Their response was, what took you so long? I'm kind of paraphrasing, but we had been discussing this as something in our future for, since the beginning. So nobody really liked the arrangement that we had. We were very slow to make changes, and, it was high maintenance, as I said. So, we have a bunch of talented folks who want to do good work and they want to do it quickly. And I think everybody recognized immediately that this was just going to, help that cause.
Awesome.
So yeah, I can talk a little bit about some of the things that we learned. At the end of the day, we deployed a brand new visualization platform in an existing production environment, and there's certainly some lessons there. So the very first thing that we did, and I think just about everybody does when they look at a new visualization platform, is start researching. And a quick Google search will teach you that everybody's won an award for something. And everybody's on a top 10 list or top 5 list or some top whatever list for best visualization platform. And in this case, this is actually a Google search for best visualization platform. And, not one of these lists picked the same winner as another list. One of them even chose 9 winners, if you can believe that. So it's pretty easy to kind of emerge from reading some of these articles that primarily just pick a few bullet points and talk about them, knowing less than you knew beforehand. And it is certainly something to be cognizant of. We learned that very quickly there is no such thing as a best solution. There is a best solution for your particular application, but it's definitely not one size fits all. So along those lines, it's important to determine what's best for your deployment. Some of the things that were important to us, or certainly topical for us as we went through the evaluation process, were visualization bells and whistles. Were we going to create artwork, or was it more important for us to develop quickly and iterate? And kind of where on the spectrum we fit in there was important for us. We talked about it a lot. We touched on it briefly a minute ago, but engineering time. What did we want to do with our engineering time? Were we going to introduce a product that would require more engineering workload, or were we going to become more efficient? Were we going to maintain the same amount of engineering hours while improving productivity, or try to reduce hours? Things like that. Embedding single sign-on. That's something that's important to a lot of folks, and certainly was important to us. And lastly, customization. We're a small company, and we knew that we were going to change a lot. So, what customizations would we be allowed to build? So, going into each of these individually, visualization bells and whistles. This is a fun analogy that we certainly worked with here in house. There's a race car on the right and a family sedan on the left. It's pretty clear that the race car is a higher performance machine. It is faster in every meaningful way than the family sedan. But on the other hand, it takes a team of 20 people just to get it started in the morning, has to warm up for half an hour, has a 5-point racing harness that takes you 3 minutes to get in and out of, and you probably can't even get it out of the driveway. And even if all those things weren't true, at the end of the day, it's probably not going to get you to the grocery store and back any faster. So this is, just a really oversimplified way to look at it. But with visualizations, the same thing can kind of happen. So we produced a visualization checklist. The first thing that we always wanted to ask ourselves was, do we know what the visualization is, or what it's trying to tell us? Do we have the skill to deploy it? If we do have the skill, can we deploy it quickly? And perhaps most importantly, will the users know what it is? it's easy to get kind of caught up in the beauty of a visualization without kind of staying grounded and making sure that the important things are checked off.
One question here, Oliver. I'm curious about how your perception of how Looker fit into these checkboxes changed over time. So from the moment that you had your first touch where I gave you a demonstration of the product to the end of the proof of concept. And if you're going to talk about this later, no worries as well. But curious about how that perception changed and maybe where the key items were in that evaluation.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So going in, we knew that anything that we went with was going to be better than what we had. So we were not extremely caught up in sort of the beauty of or the art of the visualizations. But in short order, while Looker is great and it starts with a bunch of standard visualizations that were more than enough for us, we quickly found out that we can also take it much further than that. There are visualization libraries and customizations that we saw that we would be able to do down the road as we need it.
Awesome. Thanks.
So engineering time. Fun question to ask. How much time does your engineering department have? And of course, the answer is not very much. And I think this is generally true in most environments. So for us, we knew that we didn't have extra time, but we also knew that we had an opportunity to start leveraging that time. So as you go through the evaluation process, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, it's important to know what your goals are with engineering time. So we did not want to reduce engineering time. We did not want to increase engineering time. We wanted to maintain it and improve the productivity immensely with that given amount of engineering time. So that's a good thing to factor in. Embedding single sign-on, that's super important, extremely important for us. I think everybody at some point in their lives has dealt with a single sign-on environment that looks something like this. Our requirement with our analytics or visualization platform was not only to just sign in once, it was to make it seamless. So, we've seen situations where you have a single sign-on environment that's a multitude of different platforms, and maybe it just fills in passwords for you automatically, technically qualifying it as single sign-on. But we wanted a true seamless cloud single sign-on environment where the user was completely unaware that they were transitioning from our native platform to the visualization platform and could go back and forth at will. So that was extremely important for us. We basically needed the user to sign on here, which is a sign-on page for our platform, and never have to think about it again. Customization. So this is a fun one. Everybody says that their product is infinitely customizable. We do too, actually. But the reality is these questions that you see here are often really difficult to answer. They're kind of trick questions. So we certainly don't know the answers to all of these questions. And I imagine that a lot of folks are in the same boat. And illustrative of this is that customer that I mentioned a little while ago, joining our platform, plugging in their Zendesk application. They found us in the Zendesk marketplace, plugged in one day, and boom, suddenly our company is like completely different than it was the day before. We were dealing with data volumes that we had, planned to deal with, in a year. So things like that can happen. And that's my point, especially with smaller businesses. Things change by the week sometimes. So as you evaluate the platforms, does it have sort of the right combination of off-the-shelf capabilities, which, as I mentioned, Looker certainly does, as well as kind of infinite customization. If we want to, we can go in and write code and basically change the visualization look and feel forever. So that was a really important one for us as well. As luck would have it, sort of during our deployment, because of this spike, which had just happened previously, we actually switched database platforms too. So Looker was able to accommodate that. In fact, I think Anthony can attest to this. They were unaware that we had switched until they started to see it in some of the code. So that's how flexible, Looker can be, and the right platform partnership is important because of that.
Yeah, to add a little color there as well, what Oliver's referring to is they actually switched a bit of their data stack. So they were on one database and switched over to BigQuery. And they were able to use Looker's flexible modeling layer basically to keep the logic they've described about the relationships between the tables and the dimensions and measures themselves, and then apply those just to their BigQuery, which was of similar like schema and labeling. So that was how they were able to transition that pretty quickly.
Yeah, there was a lot more involved in moving the mechanics of our platform to BigQuery than plugging in Looker to BigQuery versus Cloud SQL, which is what we're using previously. It was almost an afterthought, which is why we kind of forgot to mention it to the Looker team. So what is the outcome of all this? Well, for us, we improved our efficiency immensely. We use the figure of 10x because it's true, and it's a nice round number. You can easily see that it took us 6 months to build the first visualization set and half a month to build a Looker integration. So that's I think that's 12x. But I'm going to go into some of the details of what we do now so that we're leveraging this improved efficiency the right way. So Looker allows you to be very designful in the way that you deploy visualizations. You guys have all heard the term like no code and low code, I'm sure by now. Looker is what I would call a low code environment. Our engineering team spends a little bit of time up front learning a new language to some degree, but that was pretty quick. And then they can set up sandboxes so that the frontline team can then work within those designed sandboxes, having access to only certain amounts of data and only the correct and relevant amounts of data. And then that empowers them to work with their constituents. We talk to our customers, and sometimes our customers ask for things that we would have never imagined, and we're now able to do them in minutes, and quite often that iteration process doesn't even involve the engineering team anymore. An example of that is our creation process. So as I mentioned, we speak with our customers, they have feedback, they ask for things, and this is kind of how the cycle would look back in the day. We'd receive a request, we'd have a meeting probably the next day, kind of discuss what this request was going to look like for us, build it out in a test environment, and debug. Our front-end team and our back-end team are on 2 different time zones, so there was also a little bit of a latency there. And long story short, like one cycle would easily take a week, including debugging, and we haven't even shown it to the customer at that point. So my page just refreshed on me here, so. At that stage, we show it to the customer, and basically, the customer tells us all the things that are wrong with it. We go back into the process, and it's pretty easy to see that over the course of a couple cycles here, we are looking at a solid month to deploy a new feature. Today, things look quite a bit different. If a user requests a certain feature, we go into Looker. This is actually me using Looker now. That's an 8-second clip, and you can see with maybe 3 or 4 clicks, we generate a visualization. It's literally that fast, and then on the back end, that turns into an SQL query that looks like this. So it takes 8 seconds to design a simple visualization like that. The code is written out as you see here. It's perfect. There's no bugs. There's no mistakes. We can actually even show it to the customer at this point and make sure that we're on the right path and make any changes if we're not, which in turn updates the code you see here.
So one question here,
yeah, go ahead.
Oliver, is, you mentioned that the turnaround time before implementing Looker for showing it to the customer, getting feedback, and then deploying something they actually wanted to see was about a week. Can you share, how that's changed now, what the deployment time looks like?
Yeah, we had a request come in and we were literally able to show it to the customer in a minute. I mean, that's extreme. It was a simple request, but typically now we engage with our customers weekly still, and make sure that they have what they need. And oftentimes we can deliver a visualization that they request the same day. Once in a while, it does require more complex changes, and that may take us 2 or 3 days. So, again, we're looking at a month compared to 3 days, sort of worst case scenario now when we want to deploy a new visualization.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yep. This is an example of one of those requests, as a matter of fact. It was a common request. We had customers who wanted to know when things were changing, as opposed to having to go in and read through the visualizations every day. They wanted our platform to basically reach out and grab them and say, hey, these topics of discussion have been surfacing over the last few days. That's new. They didn't used to surface in this kind of volume that we're seeing now, that sort of thing. So we built a visualization you see here that shows topics and entities that are trending up, topics and entities that are trending down, and kind of a visual representation of what that percent change actually looks like. So this is a little bit more complex, obviously. It's not just a single graph anymore. But all of this was built with drag and drop, more or less. And it didn't take very long. It took a couple days. The visualization was bulletproof at that point. And you see, again, on the back end, this is the code. It's 800 some odd lines of code, which certainly could be done manually, but would almost certainly include some mistakes. But this is done for us, automatically as soon as we hit the save button. So we learned a little bit about deploying visualizations, and I think these lessons can be applied just about anywhere. I'll go through a couple points real quick. So lesson number one is definitely build a production pipeline. That can mean one thing to you and something entirely different to somebody else. But the most important thing is to have a process, to have a system that you follow each and every time you roll out a feature. And with Looker in particular, you are forced to follow best practices. You can't not use them. And what I mean by that is when you work with a visualization, there's a save button. I think you guys all know what that is. And then as soon as you save your work, you can review it and work through it and explore it just as a user would, but it's visible only to the person that created it. And there's 2 more steps that are required in order for a change to actually be pushed out to real users. Maybe Anthony can share a little bit about the technicalities of this.
Absolutely. And so Oliver has mentioned a little bit, he mentioned learning a new language, and I just want to shed some light here. That language is called LookML, and it's kind of our special sauce on how we describe databases in a way, or describe the data in your database in a way that is understandable for the variety of different users accessing it. So you can simply think about it as databases speak SQL, and the end users accessing it speak natural languages like English, Spanish, French, whatever it may be. And this LookML is going to serve as a translation layer between the two. So when a developer goes in and builds this LookML, like Oliver is saying, to build a visualization he wants, what Looker is going to do is it's actually fully integrated with a Git service of your choosing. We use GitHub internally. But what you're seeing here is when you make those changes, you can store the logic and then commit those changes to your personal branch and see how they work without actually breaking the production environment. So for Oliver, right, he's got a bunch of customers that are looking at his dashboards. And if he wants to make a change to those, he doesn't necessarily want that to immediately be pushed out to the customer. So this allows him to make the changes, see how they look in his own personal environment, and then once he's assured that they're working correctly, he can push those to production and then allow the customers and everyone else to see the changes that he's made. So integrating with Git allows us to build an insurance policy against all the logic you're building into your model. And that way, if anything changes and you want to go back to what you had before, you have that commit history to push back to.
Yes, and we have definitely used that commit history. It's a very valuable built-in feature for sure.
Awesome.
Taking things a little bit further. So co-creation. I mean, this is kind of common sense, but I added it here into this deploying visualization section because a lot of the time what people build isn't what customers want to see. So a good example of that is, spending a whole bunch of time building a feature. It takes weeks or however long to build it, and then nobody using it, of course. So part of our deployment strategy is, as I've mentioned a few times, talk to our customers. This particular example is a sentiment line graph. It shows conversation sentiment for a given period of time. And we had a plan internally to revamp this and make it a little more visually exciting. But before we did that, we again spoke with our users, and it turned out everybody was happy with the functionality. And they had one very simple request for us to add, and that was just a trend line. So in this particular case, it took us a minute. We could easily add the trend line, and that became part of our production environment basically overnight. An important lesson we've all probably learned at one point or another is test the actual thing that people will use. In our case, we have a completely separate test environment and production environment, and they're identical. They're functionally identical, but as Murphy's Law will teach us time and time again, things happen. And once we go through our testing procedures and we're sure that it's working perfectly and that everything will be exactly the same in the production environment, we then also test it in that production environment as well, just to make sure.
So one question I have.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yep.
Cool. One question I have here, Oliver, is you've talked a lot about just right now the customer, but prior talking about how you're saving your engineering team time and how you guys are not spending as much time in the turnaround process. But ultimately, we at Looker know, and I'm sure you know, and everyone on the call knows, the customer is the king, right? And so I want to ask about what the customer response has been to what you guys had before as far as visualizations versus now, and that entire experience, and what the feedback you're getting is there.
Yeah, I mean, the bar was pretty low for us, to be honest, in the beginning. So we've had Looker received universally well. The responses that we probably did expect, we're certainly getting, which is, wow, this looks amazing. It's so much better, yada, yada. But we've actually been surprised how many folks are comfortable with Looker already and have used it themselves. And for those people, which is a growing list of people, obviously, it's even easier. So the transition has ranged from, a breath of fresh air to complete familiarity right off the bat.
That's awesome. I actually didn't know that. And it's interesting to hear that there's already a bunch of people who are familiar with the product. And it almost sounds like, and you can clarify if I'm wrong, but it almost sounds like there's a certain level of credibility you're getting by bringing in a product that everyone already knows how to use in that way.
Yeah, we did not expect people to be familiar with it. I mean, our end users are people with other jobs. They're directors of customer experience and product managers and things like that. So their primary responsibility is those things, to manage customer experience. We did not expect them to be data scientists, of course. But we've been very surprised, again, how many folks are already familiar with Looker. And that's kind of changed how we build. Actually, we're starting to allow more and more customization for our users than we ever really planned to. Again, tying into the flexibility of the platform, with Looker, we're able to pivot like that pretty easily and permit as much or as little customization for our end users as they're up for. So the last lesson is measure usage. We did not know we were going to get all the analytics that we got when we started working with Looker, and we're pleasantly surprised to find that everything is measured and stored. So right off the shelf, you will have access to hundreds of different metrics that tell you exactly what visualizations your users love or use often, how they use it, when they use it. Basically everything that you want to know. And that's a really important part of the production pipeline. You spend a lot of time deciding what to deploy. And it's important then to monitor, what people are actually using. So it's a little bit about our journey. It was a much faster journey than I think we expected or or anybody else expected. And I urge all you guys to at least try the product out if you haven't already, and try to make the transition yourself. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Oliver. I think that provided a lot of valuable insight. Hopefully, the audience agrees with me. But I think now, before we get into the Q&A, I'm just going to jump in from my perspective, a quick overview of how Looker saves time for engineers, analysts, and anyone in between. And one thing I should mention before I get into this, I forgot to mention at the beginning, this presentation will also be recorded. So for those of you who need to step out for a moment and maybe miss something, we'll be sending out this recording later, just so you guys are aware. But cool, with that, we'll get started. Just a quick agenda, really simple here. We're just going to talk really quickly about what Looker is and how it fits into the space. And then I know we have a pretty mixed audience on here of different roles and whatnot. So I'm going to use a simple analogy to describe, I talked a little bit earlier about that secret sauce called LookML. I'm going to use a simple analogy that hopefully we can all relate to describe that. And then we'll wrap up real quick and then get into Q&A. So starting off here with what is Looker? Well, by now you're probably aware that Looker's a web-based and cloud-based analytics platform. And our mission has always been to empower people through smarter use of data. Now, this mission we've had to adapt and change as we've gotten different customers and different verticals. And you're seeing a number of them here. We integrate with a bunch of different web services like Google Cloud, Amazon, Snowflake, and lots of different partners as well, like Slack and Teams, so that we can make these data workflows a lot easier and more intuitive for the users. But one of the specific places that we've really tried to empower the users is by saving them time, both on the development front and on the analyst front and on the business user front. So that's what I'm going to talk specifically about today. And I think the best way to do this is through a simple analogy. So the analogy we're going to start with here is just a simple landline, not super outdated technology, but the analogy here is looking at just the number pad on the landline. Now, I mainly just use this to dial *67 and prank call my friends. But at the time, when this came out, this was a pretty advanced technology in that you could call any number you wanted. You just had to use the number pad as a blank canvas. Now, over time, if you don't have access to those numbers and you don't have access to people who have contact information, with this technology, you're not going to get very far. And so what have we done to improve that? As technology has advanced, we developed something simple like address books in our iPhones or Androids or whatever it may be, right? So in this way, instead of having to go to the phone every time and type in the number of the person we want to reach, we can store that logic about that number to a phone, to a contact name, and we can even reuse that number in a plethora of places, whether that's texting, phone calling. We can also store email information and email directly from the contact. So all of this stuff you guys are familiar with, and we're saving time by not forcing memorization and not forcing people to, ask other people for contact information. In the case of like a company or organization, they're going to have a company address book. So if you're a new employee, you need to contact another employee that you haven't met before, you can look up that information. Don't have to go up the chain of people to get the contact info you need. So saving time that way. So now, to relate this back to Looker and data analysis in general, what we can think of is SQL, which is standard or structured query language, as the kind of standard for how you get results from a database. So if you have your data stored in a database, you're going to learn this code to get the results you want. In this example, you can see we're looking for something called total gross margin. And to do that, we're doing some sum logic between two different fields, pulling from a specific table. But in order to use this, just like the number pad, this is kind of a blank canvas. You need to know what you're doing. You need to know the language. And you also need to know the logical definitions behind the metrics you're trying to understand. So you can either do that, or you can ask someone who's more technical than you to do it for you. So at Looker, we realized that this is not really a self-service approach, and that can be really time-consuming. So what we did, just like the address book, we used something called LookML to create a more user-friendly environment for selecting different fields from the database. So what you're seeing here is what we call the field picker. In this example, we have a list of just the different fields that you might want to build a report based on, like total gross margin you see at the bottom here, and the date. And you can just click those fields as an end user, not necessarily needing to know or define what the logic is behind them, and build a report based on them. So you're saving time here by not having to memorize the logic or learn SQL, but you can just build the reports this way, just like you saw in Oliver's GIF earlier. So what's the end result of all this? Well, the end result here, very similar gift to what Oliver was showing you, is a user-friendly environment where anyone from developer to business user to someone who's never touched code can come in and start building their own reports. And they don't have to worry about memorizing SQL, and they don't have to worry about going to bug someone who knows the data stack better than them or knows SQL and they don't, to then build a report based off of. So recap, how does this save us time? Well, there's twofold here. For the non-technical user, for the business user, the analyst, you're saving time by manner of self-service, right? Everyone knows if you can get something done yourself, it's much faster than going up the chain of command and asking other people to do it for you. Now, the other angle is you don't need, like I mentioned earlier, you don't need to memorize the SQL logic, or you don't even need to learn SQL at all. And then in addition, you don't need to go ask someone who knows more about SQL than you to build that report for you. For a developer and for an engineer, what you're doing when you store that logic, just like you're storing a phone number in an address book, is making it so you don't have to type that logic out again. So if you're really comfortable with SQL and you like SQL a lot, this is going to make SQL reusable for you. And this is going to get technical here for a second. But basically, if you're defining, a certain date range that you want to use, you can store that and then reuse it both in a select statement, a group statement, a where clause, whatever you want to do there. And this is same for join. So I have that example here. You can reuse the join logic, so you can type it in once. That's something that I know as someone who's used SQL myself, right? Writing joins can get really redundant. So storing that logic and being able to reuse it without having to think about it is really nice. And the last thing is you're also going to limit the number of users coming to you with requests for building reports for them. So you're going to be freed up in your own time that way, all through self-service. Awesome. So that pretty much wraps up what I wanted to say here. I want to give Oliver a chance here to expand on what I'm talking about here with using LookML. And I want to ask him, from your personal experience using LookML and beforehand not having that to build reports, what is the difference, and how has your engineering team's response been to learning that language and using it to build reports?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I want to highlight is our 2-week deployment that kind of inadvertently happened as we were trialing the product included learning a new language, LookML. So I want to make it clear that that was not a burden. We learned a completely new platform, trialed it out, made it work exactly the way we want it, and deployed it to our platform. So the transition has been really quite easy, primarily because it's an easy language to learn. I'm not an engineer myself, but even I can understand how it works. And that combined with Looker's support crew and the power of Google means you can really do anything you want pretty easily. So the transition has been painless, and our engineering team is almost not involved with visualizations anymore. I think it's been 3 weeks since we actually had to change any of the backend code that makes it all work. And all the while, we are changing and evolving the front end of the visualizations daily and making them better and better.
Awesome. Thanks for that insight. And one thing I should mention, too, is this LookML code is just an abstraction of SQL. So if you know SQL already and you're going to have an engineer manage this, it's going to be something they're going to pick up really quickly. And additionally, I'm going to go back to one slide here. And what also is a benefit here is just like when you store an address for like your mom, for example, right? You store your mom's phone number, and let's say she gets a new phone. If you need to update that number, you can go in and update the number without actually updating the label for that contact. You can do the same in LookML. So this becomes your kind of single source of truth for all of these different metrics. So if total gross margin needs to change, you go in there and change it on the back end, and the front end users don't necessarily even need to be aware that changed. It's just going to be their same kind of workflow of building those reports based on it. So that can save a lot of time as well, not having to go to each place that total gross margin is referenced and update the definition there. You only have to do it in one spot. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for letting us talk to you here about the saving development resources with Looker. Here are some resources. I'm going to leave this slide up for you guys to look at. But I think we're going to go ahead and get into the Q&A now. I know you guys, a bunch of you have been typing out some good questions. So we'll start here with one about the data stack. And this one's for Oliver. And it's just asking, can you talk more about your data stack and what other applications you might be using with Looker?
Yeah, it's a short answer, but when we first engaged with Looker, we were on Google Cloud SQL, and by the time we finished our trial, we were on BigQuery as well as Cloud SQL. And I actually see another question here. Somebody's asking if that information can be updated automatically. And yeah, we once you plug into the database, in our case, it's BigQuery now. As soon as the database changes, that's reflected automatically in Looker. So that's our data stack. We have a pretty large BigQuery database, and we plug Looker in directly to that.
Awesome. And can you speak to the performance of Looker on that database a little bit? Has it been? Or go ahead. That's fine.
Yeah. Oh, it's that was one of the reasons that we absolutely had to make a change. Is we were spending like 75% of our engineering resources optimizing queries so that our visualizations were not going to sink the ship. Since we transitioned to Looker, we have fully optimized queries already, so we don't have to worry about writing bad queries. And additionally, there's a pretty sophisticated caching model that you can adjust in every which way, so that the perceived load times can drop down to basically nothing. And we certainly take full advantage of those because we have some pretty large, pretty complicated dashboards that even with BigQuery, which is a speed optimized database, would normally take a little bit of time to load, and we're able to work through that now.
Awesome. And I see one other question here that's pretty related, and it's saying, I'm assuming we need to input the data ourselves for Looker to create the visualization. Is that correct, or can Looker pull from data sources automatically? And I'll take this one because that's an architecture question. And the way that Looker is architected, is a little bit different than most of the solutions out there. We actually aren't going to pull or extract any data out of your database, but like we've been talking about, Looker is going to write performance SQL to the database. So it's actually just going to sit right on top of that database, issue SQL queries to the database, and then surface the results through the web application. So the best practice we see is to centralize all that data in one database optimized for analytics, like Oliver and SupporTrends has done with Google BigQuery, and then Looker will pull that. Now there's one, we'll not pull that, but we'll surface results and write SQL to that. So you're getting the benefit of real-time connection to that database. Now, one thing I also should mention here, you said, or can I pull data from sources automatically? Looker can also white glove some of that process for you with a bunch of the common connectors through what we call our connection hub. So we can connect directly to these data sources, and basically we're going to white glove a process of pulling directly from those data sources and spinning up a BigQuery instance, and then putting Looker on top of that. But that will all be Looker managed. So that's an option as well. I know sometimes the time to value of getting the whole analytics and ETL process done in one step can be really valuable. Awesome.
I see a question that I want to jump in on because it's an awesome question, and it was an incredible experience when we went through this too. It's from Benjamin. He's asking how we segment customer data. Does it have to be in separate databases? And we do not segment customer data in separate databases. It basically authenticates through the embed. So that experience for us embedding Looker into our platform included the details of that very question. Obviously, we have multiple customers and they can't all share each other's data. So when we deployed the embedded instance, which took a day, literally one day, it included segmenting customer data by their account ID and authenticating through our front-end authentication system. So that's the answer to your question. No, you do not need to separate everything. Looker can automatically segment user data based on a key or a user ID in this case.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that by saying, that the way that Oliver is describing is what we call a multi-tenant database infrastructure. So where you've got multiple different customers all stored in one database. And Looker definitely supports the row-level security there, just like Oliver's mentioning. But we can also, if you guys choose, we see a lot of customers who do have their customers' data segmented by different databases. And we can also do what's called parameterizing the connection, where we choose when a customer logs in, we're only going to show them data from X database because we know what company they're tied to, and we know what company that database should be tied to. So the answer is we can do both. We can support all the customers in one database, or single tenant where each customer has their own database. And we understand that sometimes for security reasons, that's the route that people will go. Now, the next question I see here is, you mentioned that Looker allows custom UI to be coded seamlessly. Does it support custom React components natively? So this one, basically the full customization comes with custom JavaScript. So if you want to create your own visualizations with JavaScript code or take advantage of an existing library like AM charts is a good one, you can do that. And then the way that it'll integrate with React is it'll just be through the Looker iframe. It'll be able to use React as well. So hopefully that answers that question. Let's see. Next one here. Is it possible to create authenticated portals sites through Looker with embedded Looker analytics for B2B customers? So this one, yeah. So I think this is pretty much what Oliver is doing today, where he's got his own portal that his users log on to his platform with, and then Looker is just a part of that platform. And so when those users from other businesses that are customers of Oliver's log on, they're authenticated in Looker as well automatically, and then they're able to see analytics that are specific to them. Oliver, anything you'd add there?
That's exactly right. Yeah, we could embed a multitude of different dashboards in different places or different sites. So yeah, certainly possible.
Awesome. These are some great questions, so feel free to keep them coming. A couple more here. The slides have a Google Cloud label on the bottom right. Does that mean Looker only works with data stored in Google Cloud? This is a really important one. I'm really glad that you asked this. So if you guys haven't heard, most of you probably have, but Looker was recently acquired by Google. That said, we have tons of customers who are on different data platforms, and we intend for that to continue. So Looker can be supported on AWS, on Google Cloud, on Snowflake, whatever cloud service, whatever cloud database service you guys are using, we're going to continue to support that. We're going to be cloud agnostic is our plan for the future. In addition to that, Looker can also be, if you have security concerns, Looker can also be hosted on-premise. So if you guys have like an Oracle on-premise database, we can support that as well. Is there an easy way to copy dashboards built in the staging environment to production? Oliver, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, part of our future planning with Looker involves that. So we have kind of a baseline set of dashboards that all of our users have access to, and they can't change them. They're the same for everybody. But we've learned that customers do want special dashboards. They want slight variations. So while most of our users are probably not ready to manage their own dashboards and create them themselves, we do recognize the need to drive a series of different dashboards. And for us, what that is going to look like is essentially to have a master dashboard whose LookML code drives the sort of children, if you will. So that whenever we make a change to the master, it controls the selected parameters on all the other dashboards as well. So that's sort of an answer to that question. And if you just want to make a simple copy, yeah, there's an easy way just to copy a dashboard. You do then need to be aware that you're managing copies, and sometimes the workload there can be quite high. And you can also, through the drag and drop interface, you create your dashboard. You can then click a button and you get all of the LookML code, as I showed earlier in my slides. And you can turn that into a LookML driven dashboard as well, and take advantage of the built-in production pipeline that Looker has. So pretty simple question. There's at least 3 different ways to solve for it. And one of them is something that we're working on right now, as I mentioned.
Awesome. And to add a little more there as well, the reason to use, there's 2 types of dashboards within Looker. There's ones that are kind of done with a graphic interface, and there's ones that are based in LookML. And you can actually just convert back and forth between the 2 really seamlessly. But the benefit of doing code-based dashboards is that way they're going to get version control just like the rest of your data model. so that if you want to make changes to the dashboard, then you decide you like something that you had before better, you can just revert right back to that old commit you had. Additionally, for embedded analytics specifically, one of the biggest things we see is, well, we want to provide a templated dashboard. We, as the Looker customer, want to provide a templated dashboard to all of our customers embedded, but then we want that to allow them to make the changes they need or want based on that dashboard in their own environment. And so the way that we do this is by different content access. So we can have a shared folder for everyone, and for all customers, where we have that templated dashboard that's being filtered according to their appropriate data, and then allow them to not edit that dashboard, but make a copy of it as their own in their company, and then make the edits they want and save the dashboard. So they have a starting point to go from for inspiration, and then build their own custom experience from there. That's what we see a lot of different customers do. Awesome. Another question here, and Oliver, you hit on this a little bit. I'm wondering if there are other upcoming plans you have that involve Looker or outside of Looker.
Yeah, so from a Looker perspective, I did mention it previously, but we are focusing a lot of our energy now on kind of developing the best of both worlds, where users can consume sort of the cookie cutter dashboards that we've built for them, as well as kind of an easy way for them to create and expand their environments without creating a large management workload. So that relates to driving multiple dashboards with a single sort of master dashboard, and that's in our near future. And yeah, from a natural language standpoint, our company is integrating with more and more different platforms every day. I mentioned Zendesk. We're now integrated with a platform called Customer with a K, and we're working on a lot more in the future, as well as the Zoom application. So we are trying to bring in as many channels as we can so that we can share this really insightful natural language data on a really beautiful Looker user interface with more and more people.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. I think on that note, unless you guys have some other questions, I think we're going to end it here. Thank you so much for joining. Like I mentioned, we're going to send out a recording of this webinar, so you guys will have access to that. But yeah, once again, thanks so much for joining, and looking forward to speaking to more of you soon, hopefully.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, we are in the clear. Thank you very much.